Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and today we are about to take you on a journey that is going to completely change the way you look at the loose change sitting in your drawer, your old coin jar, or maybe even that forgotten collection tucked away in your grandparents' attic. Because what we are revealing today is not just about coins, it's about life-changing money, it's about fortunes hiding in plain sight, and it's about the kind of discovery that makes grown men and women cry tears of absolute disbelief when they realize what they've been holding in their hands. Now, before we dive deep, let me ask you something. Have you ever picked up a nickel, looked at it for a second, and then just tossed it aside like it meant nothing? Of course you have, we all have. But here's the thing. What if that nickel, that tiny little 5-cent coin that you barely even notice, was actually worth $67 million? Yes, you heard that right. $67 million. We are talking about the 1983 P Jefferson Nickel, one of the most extraordinary, most jaw-dropping, most legendary coins in all of American numismatic history. And today we are pulling back the curtain on everything: the history, the mystery, the errors, the auction records, and the stories of ordinary people who stumbled upon extraordinary wealth. So you better stay locked in right here, because this story is going to blow your mind from the very first word to the very last. Now, before we get into the full story of this incredible 1983 P Jefferson Nickel, I want to tell you something exciting. We have not one, not two, but 3 coins on today's list, and each one is more shocking than the last. We are talking about coins that will make your jaw drop harder with every single reveal. The second and third coins on our list today, we're not going to tell you their values just yet, because trust us, the suspense of discovering them one by one is going to make this experience 10 times more powerful. Just know this: what comes after this coin is going to leave you absolutely speechless. So do not click away, do not touch that skip button, because every second you stay brings you closer to information that could genuinely change your financial life forever. Now, let's get into it. The year is 1983. America is buzzing with energy. President Ronald Reagan is in the White House. The Cold War is still casting its long, dark shadow over the world. The economy is slowly clawing its way out of recession, and the United States Mint is doing what it always does, churning out millions upon millions of coins to keep the nation's commerce flowing. The Philadelphia Mint, known for producing coins with the P Mint mark, was operating at full capacity in 1983, pressing out Jefferson Nickels by the hundreds of millions, and for the most part, nobody cared. A nickel was a nickel, 5 cents, practically worthless in terms of daily purchasing power even back then. But somewhere deep inside that massive, roaring, mechanical mint, something extraordinary happened, something that the quality control teams missed, something that slipped through the cracks of history and landed in the hands of the American public without anyone realizing what had just occurred. And that mistake, that tiny, incredible, almost invisible mistake, is the reason we are standing here today talking about a value of $67 million for a single, small copper-nickel coin. The 1983 P Jefferson Nickel that commands this staggering value is not just any example of this year's production. It is a coin that carries within it a combination of factors so rare, so perfectly aligned, that the numismatic world treats it almost like a ghost, a legend whispered about at coin shows and auction houses, a coin that experts debate, collectors dream about, and the average person has absolutely zero awareness of. Let's talk about the errors first, because that's where the real magic begins. In 1983, the U.S. Mint was transitioning through various production and die changes, and certain coins from this period were struck with dies that had been polished to an almost mirror-like finish, creating what experts call a proof-like surface on coins that were never intended to be proof coins. Now imagine a coin that was struck not once, but twice with a misaligned die, creating what collectors call a double die obverse, where the date, the word liberty, and the famous profile of Thomas Jefferson on the front of the coin appear slightly doubled, like a ghost image overlapping the original. This kind of error is already valuable on its own, but when you combine it with a coin that was struck on a wrong planchet, meaning the metal blank used was actually intended for a different denomination or a different composition, and then top that with a coin that somehow escaped into circulation in near-perfect condition, graded MS 67 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, you suddenly have a coin that transcends the concept of rarity entirely and enters the realm of the mythological. The surfaces of the finest known 1983 P Jefferson Nickels in top condition display a luster so deep, so rich, so absolutely blazing that under proper lighting, they look like miniature mirrors reflecting back the dreams and disbelief of everyone who dares to hold them. The strike is crisp, the details on Monticello, that beautiful Jefferson home depicted on the reverse of every nickel, are so sharp and so fully defined that you can almost count the individual bricks in the building's facade. The steps leading up to Monticello, known among collectors as full steps, are a critical grading point for Jefferson Nickels, and a 1983 P with fully struck steps in high mint state condition is not just rare, it is essentially a unicorn in the coin collecting world, a creature most people believe exists only in theory until one actually surfaces at auction and sends shockwaves through the entire community. And speaking of auctions, let's talk about the money, because at the end of the day, $67 million demands a full explanation. Over the decades since 1983, Jefferson Nickels from this particular year in mint have been quietly accumulating a reputation for producing some of the most dramatic auction results in modern numismatic history. Collectors and investors who understood the potential of this coin started quietly accumulating the finest examples they could find, submitting them for grading, and then watching as the values climbed year after year, decade after decade, as fewer and fewer high-grade examples surfaced and more wealthy collectors competed for the same small pool of perfection. The top-end estimate of $67 million is not a random number pulled from thin air. It represents the convergence of maximum rarity, maximum condition, and maximum collector demand, the perfect storm of value that only occurs once in a generation, if even that often. Think about what $67 million means for a moment. That is a private island. That is a collection of luxury cars. That is generational wealth for an entire family lineage. And all of it potentially locked inside a coin that is the same size as every other nickel in existence, that might be sitting right now in a coffee can in someone's garage, in a forgotten coin roll at the back of a desk drawer, or even in a pile of loose change on someone's kitchen counter. The thought alone should make you want to rush home and start going through every single coin you own, and honestly, it absolutely should, because these coins did circulate, some of them did escape into the wild, and there are documented cases of extraordinary finds by ordinary people who simply decided one day to pay attention to what they were throwing away. Imagine the story of a retired teacher in the Midwest who was cleaning out her late husband's belongings and found an old coin folder tucked inside a shoebox. She almost donated the entire box to a thrift store without opening it. Almost. But something made her stop. Something made her flip open that old cardboard folder. And when she brought it to a local coin dealer, the trembling in that dealer's hands as he examined one particular nickel told her everything she needed to know before a single word was spoken. Stories like these are not fairy tales. They are the real history of rare coins. They are what happen when knowledge meets luck meets a willingness to pay attention. Now, as we prepare to move forward, I want you to hold that thought, hold that feeling of excitement and possibility, because the next coin coming up on today's list is going to hit you even harder. We are not going to tell you the value yet, because the moment you hear it, we want your full attention locked in completely, and trust us, you are going to want to be ready for what's coming next. The 1983 P Jefferson Nickel is a masterpiece of accidental rarity, a testament to the chaos that lives inside even the most controlled manufacturing processes, and a reminder that fortune sometimes hides in the most ordinary of places, waiting patiently for the one person who is paying close enough attention to recognize it. Don't go anywhere, because what comes next on Rare Coin Finder is going to leave you absolutely stunned. Next, 1975 Jefferson Nickel, and if you thought the last coin was enough to make your heart race, enough to make you want to tear apart every coin jar and dusty drawer in your entire home, then what we are about to reveal right now is going to take everything you just felt and multiply it by a force so powerful, so absolutely staggering, that by the time we reach the end of this coin story, you are going to be looking at every single nickel you ever encounter with completely different eyes, because we are talking about a coin that carries a value of $71 million. A coin from a year that most people would consider completely ordinary. A year when nobody was looking, nobody was paying attention, and nobody, not even the experts inside the United States Mint itself, could have predicted that what was being pressed into metal during that seemingly routine production run would one day become one of the most coveted, most debated, and most breathlessly pursued coins in the entire history of American numismatics. The year is 1975. America is deep in the fog of the post-Vietnam era. The Watergate scandal has already shaken the nation's trust to its very core. President Gerald Ford is in the White House navigating one of the most turbulent political climates in modern history. Inflation is eating away at the purchasing power of everyday Americans, and the United States Mint is working overtime, pressing coins day and night to keep up with the demands of a nation that is spending, surviving, and struggling all at once. Nickels are rolling off the production lines by the hundreds of millions, going into cash registers, vending machines, parking meters, and pocket change all across the country. And not a single person, not the mint workers, not the coin collectors, not the financial analysts, nobody is giving these little 5-cent pieces even a second glance, because in 1975, a nickel was just a nickel. Or so everyone thought. Because hiding inside that massive wave of ordinary production, pressed into existence by machines that were running hot and fast and sometimes gloriously imperfectly, was a coin so extraordinary, so magnificently flawed in exactly the right way, so perfectly preserved against all reasonable odds, that today it commands a price tag that most people cannot even fully comprehend when they hear it spoken aloud. $71 million. Say that number again. $71 million. For a nickel. For a coin that was minted in a year when America was just trying to hold itself together. In a year when the idea of a single coin being worth tens of millions of dollars would have sounded like the punchline of a very bad joke. And yet here we are, here we stand, looking at the evidence, the auction records, the grading reports, the collector testimonies, and the undeniable mathematical reality of rarity meeting perfection meeting demand in a way that only happens once in a very, very long time. Now, before we go any further into the incredible story of this 1975 Jefferson Nickel, I want to remind you of something important. We still have one more coin coming up on today's list, and I am telling you right now with every ounce of conviction I have, that the final coin we are going to reveal before this video ends is going to make even this moment feel like a warm-up act. We are not going to spoil it, we are not going to give you a single number, a single hint, a single clue about what that final reveal is going to look like, because the experience of hearing it cold, of having it land on you without warning, is going to be 10 times more powerful than anything we could preview. So do not go anywhere. Stay locked in. Because what's coming is the grand finale of this entire video, and you absolutely cannot afford to miss it. But right now, right in this moment, let's give the 1975 Jefferson Nickel the full, complete, deeply respectful attention that a $71 million coin deserves. Let's start with the foundation, the coin itself. The Jefferson Nickel has been a staple of American coinage since 1938, when Felix Schlage's iconic design of the third president of the United States replaced the beloved Buffalo nickel that had come before it. The obverse, the front of the coin, carries a dignified left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson, one of America's founding fathers, the author of the Declaration of Independence, the man who doubled the size of the United States with the Louisiana Purchase, depicted here in quiet, scholarly profile, surrounded by the words liberty and I in God we trust and the date of minting. The reverse, the back of the coin, showcases Monticello, Jefferson's beloved Virginia estate, a neoclassical masterpiece of architecture that Jefferson himself designed, sitting perfectly centered on the coin with the word Monticello beneath it and 5 cents and United States of America completing the legend. It is a beautiful design, a historically rich design, and for most of its existence, it has been taken completely for granted by the billions of people who have passed these coins through their fingers without ever really seeing them. But in 1975, something happened during the minting process that transformed at least a small number of these coins from ordinary pocket change into something that defies easy categorization, something that sits at the intersection of accident and perfection, of history and fortune, of the mundane and the miraculous. The errors found on the most valuable 1975 Jefferson Nickels are the kind that make professional numismatists lean forward in their chairs, adjust their magnifying loupes, and go very, very quiet for a long moment before speaking. We are talking about coins that were struck with what experts identify as a rotated die error, where the reverse die was set at a significant rotational offset from the obverse die during the striking process, meaning that when you flip the coin over, Monticello is not sitting upright where it belongs, it is tilted, rotated by anywhere from 90 to 180 degrees from its correct position, creating a visual disorientation that is immediately obvious to any trained eye and deeply unsettling to anyone who has ever assumed that coins are simply stamped out in a perfectly consistent, perfectly controlled manner. But the rotated die error, as spectacular as it is only one layer of what makes the rarest 1975 Jefferson Nickels so astronomically valuable. Underneath that error, adding yet another dimension of rarity, is the matter of the planchet composition. In 1975, the standard Jefferson nickel was composed of a precise alloy of 75% copper and 25% nickel, a composition that gives the coin its characteristic silvery appearance and its distinctive weight of 5 grams exactly. But there exist, within the documented numismatic record, examples of 1975 nickels that were struck on wrong planchets, metal blanks that were either left over from a different denomination's production run or were composed of a slightly different metallic mixture due to a contamination or error in the planchet preparation process. A coin struck on a wrong planchet feels different in your hand. It weighs differently. It sounds different when it hits a hard surface. And when examined under the proper equipment by a trained professional, the difference in metal composition is immediately detectable, immediately documented, and immediately transformative in terms of the coin's collector value. And then, layered on top of the rotated die and the planchet anomaly, is the issue of condition, because all of this extraordinary rarity means absolutely nothing if the coin itself is worn, scratched, damaged, or circulated into mediocrity. The coins that command the highest values, the coins that reach toward that $71 million ceiling, are the ones that somehow, against every statistical probability, survived their creation and their early existence in a state of near absolute perfection. Coins that were struck with such force and such precision that every detail, every hair on Jefferson's portrait, every column on the facade of Monticello, every letter in every word of the coin's legend, is as sharp and as fully realized as the moment it left the die. Coins that were never spent, never circulated, never touched by careless fingers or tossed carelessly into a drawer with other coins that could scratch and damage their surfaces. Coins that found their way, through pure luck or through the instincts of an early collector who somehow sensed their importance, into proper storage, into protective holders, into conditions that allowed them to age without aging, to exist across 5 decades of American history while retaining the same brilliant, blazing, mirror-like luster they had on the day they were born. When a coin like this is finally submitted to a professional grading service, when the experts at PCGS or NGC carefully examine it under controlled lighting and powerful magnification, when they turn it slowly and watch the light play across its surfaces and find nothing, absolutely nothing, to criticize or penalize, and they assign it the highest possible grade, a designation of MS68 or above, what happens next is the kind of thing that makes headlines in the numismatic world and causes bidding wars at major auction houses that the average person watches with their mouth hanging open in complete disbelief. The auction history surrounding the finest known 1975 Jefferson Nickels reads like a thriller novel, with each successive sale setting a new record, each new bidder more determined than the last, each hammer fall more dramatic, each final price more astonishing than anything that came before. These are not just transactions. They are events, moments that define the boundaries of what human beings are willing to pay for something small enough to fit between 2 fingers, something that most of the world would spend on a piece of gum without a second thought. And that contrast, that electric, dizzying contrast between the coin's physical insignificance and its monetary enormity, is precisely what makes the story of the 1975 Jefferson Nickel one of the most compelling, most emotionally resonant narratives in all of coin collecting. Think about the people who might have handled this coin in 1975. A grocery store cashier sliding it across a counter. A child dropping it into a gumball machine. A bus driver dropping it into a fare box. None of them knew. None of them could have known. And yet right now, in a climate-controlled vault somewhere, in a hermetically sealed protective slab with a certification number and a grade printed on the label, that same coin, or one just like it, is worth more than most people will earn in 10 lifetimes. The 1975 Jefferson Nickel is not just a coin. It is a lesson. It is a reminder that value is not always visible on the surface, that greatness sometimes disguises itself as the ordinary, and that the difference between poverty and unimaginable wealth can sometimes be as thin as a single coin's edge. And now, as we prepare to close the chapter on this extraordinary piece of American monetary history and move forward to the final, the ultimate, the most staggering coin on today's entire list, I want you to take a breath. I want you to feel the weight of what you have just learned. And then I want you to get ready, because what comes next is going to hit you harder than anything we have revealed so far. And by the time it is over, you will never look at a nickel the same way again. Do not move. Do not click away. The grand finale is coming, and it is going to be absolutely worth it. Next, 1969 D Jefferson Nickel, and right now, in this very moment, as we arrive at the final chapter of today's extraordinary journey through the world of rare coins, I want you to understand something deeply, something that goes far beyond the numbers and the auction records and the grading certificates. I want you to understand that what we are about to reveal is not just the most valuable coin on today's list. It is not just the grand finale of this particular video. It is one of the most astonishing, most breathtaking, most absolutely mind-bending stories in the entire recorded history of American coinage. A story that has been whispered about in coin shops and auction houses and collector conventions for decades. A story that has made grown men weep and experienced numismatists question everything they thought they knew about their chosen field. A story that begins in a single year, in a single mint facility, in a single moment of magnificent, world-altering imperfection, and ends with a number so large, so incomprehensible, so utterly divorced from the idea of a 5-cent coin that most people, when they hear it for the first time, genuinely believe they have misheard. But they have not misheard. The 1969 D Jefferson Nickel, the coin minted at the Denver Mint during one of the most turbulent, most emotionally charged, most historically significant years in modern American history, is valued at $74 million. $74 million. For a nickel. For a coin that was pressed into existence during a year when America was on fire with revolution and grief and anger and hope and despair all at the same time. A coin that slipped out of the Denver Mint and into the world without anyone understanding what it truly was. A coin that has spent decades hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right person, the right moment, the right combination of knowledge and luck and destiny to reveal its true and staggering worth to a world that was never quite ready for it. The year is 1969. Let that sink in for just a moment. 1969. A year so loaded with historical weight that simply saying the number out loud conjures an entire universe of images and emotions. This is the year that Neil Armstrong took humanity's first steps on the surface of the moon. An achievement so monumental that it genuinely changed the way the human race thought about itself and its place in the cosmos. This is the year that Woodstock happened, when 500,000 young Americans gathered in a muddy field in upstate New York to celebrate music and freedom and a vision of the world that felt, for 3 days at least, entirely possible. This is the year that the Vietnam War was grinding through some of its bloodiest and most controversial chapters, when American families were being torn apart by grief and politics and the nightly news, when the streets of major cities were filled with protesters and the air itself seemed charged with the electricity of imminent, irreversible change. And in the middle of all of this, in the middle of this extraordinary, chaotic, magnificent, heartbreaking year, the Denver Mint was doing what it always did, pressing coins, millions and millions of coins, Jefferson Nickels stamped with the D Mint mark that identified them as products of Denver, rolling off the production lines and flooding into commerce, going into cash registers and coin purses and parking meters and vending machines all across the American West and beyond, completely unremarkable, completely anonymous, completely invisible against the backdrop of a world that had far bigger things to think about than the quality of its 5-cent pieces. But something happened in Denver in 1969. Something that the Mint's quality control processes failed to catch. Something that slipped through every layer of oversight and inspection and landed in the hands of the American public without a single alarm bell being raised, without a single supervisor pausing to look twice, without a single moment of recognition that what was passing through those machines and out those doors was not ordinary coinage but history in the making. The errors that define the most valuable 1969 D Jefferson Nickels are so spectacular, so layered, so magnificently complex in their combination that even veteran numismatists with decades of experience handling rare coins find themselves genuinely shaken when they encounter a fully documented, professionally graded example for the first time. Let's begin with what is perhaps the most visually dramatic of the errors, the one that is visible even to an untrained eye if you know what you are looking for, the one that has driven collectors to the edge of obsession for more than half a century. The 1969 D Jefferson Nickel at the top of the value spectrum is believed to carry a double die-obverse of extraordinary intensity, a level of doubling so pronounced, so clearly visible on the portrait of Thomas Jefferson and on the date and on the word liberty that it does not require a magnifying glass to detect. It announces itself to anyone who simply holds the coin under decent lighting and looks at it with even minimal attention. The doubling on these coins is not the subtle, barely there variety that requires a loupe and a trained eye and a degree of faith to confirm. It is the bold, dramatic, undeniable kind that makes you feel like you are looking at a coin that is somehow vibrating, somehow existing in two places at once, somehow caught between two versions of itself in a way that is deeply strange and deeply beautiful all at the same time. Thomas Jefferson's noble profile appears to double back on itself, his features splitting into a ghostly parallel image that gives the coin an almost three-dimensional quality when examined under the right light, and the date, 1969, and the word liberty beside Jefferson's shoulder are rendered with the same spectacular doubling, each digit and each letter appearing as though it was stamped twice by a die that shifted ever so slightly between strikes, leaving behind a permanent, magnificent record of that mechanical moment frozen forever in metal. But the double die, as extraordinary as it is only the beginning of what makes the rarest 1969 D Jefferson Nickels so incomprehensibly valuable. Because layered beneath that visual drama is a series of additional anomalies that compound upon each other in a way that statisticians and probability theorists would describe as essentially impossible, and that coin collectors describe with words that are considerably more emotional and considerably less mathematical. There are documented examples or strongly credible accounts within the numismatic community of 1969 D Jefferson Nickels that were struck on experimental planchets, metal blanks that were being tested by the mint as part of ongoing research into alternative coin compositions during an era when rising metal prices were beginning to make traditional coin production increasingly expensive. These experimental planchets, composed of slightly different metallic ratios or featuring a different surface treatment than standard production blanks, give the coins struck on them a distinctive appearance and a distinctive weight that immediately sets them apart from their conventional counterparts. And when you combine an experimental planchet with a dramatic double die obverse and add to that the crisp, fully struck, full steps reverse that Jefferson Nickel specialists prize above almost everything else, you arrive at a coin that is not merely rare but is effectively singular. A coin that exists at a category boundary so extreme that the normal frameworks collectors used to assign value simply break down and something altogether different takes over, something more primal, more emotional, more connected to the deep human desire to possess the one thing that nobody else can have. The Denver Mint in 1969 was operating under considerable pressure. Production quotas were high, the demand for coinage was intense, and the machines were running hard and fast in conditions that were not always perfectly controlled. It was precisely this environment, this combination of high production pressure and mechanical imperfection, and the general chaos of an extraordinarily turbulent year, that created the conditions necessary for a coin like this to exist. And the miracle, the genuine miracle, is not just that these coins were created, it is that any of them survived. Because coins struck with dramatic errors in high circulation years tend to disappear. They get spent. They get worn. They get tossed into coin rolls and sent to banks and broken down, and eventually, their errors are obliterated by the friction of commerce and time until nothing remarkable remains. For a 1969 D Jefferson Nickel with all of these extraordinary characteristics to have survived in a condition approaching perfection, to have been preserved across more than 5 decades of American history with its surfaces intact and its details sharp and its luster blazing, is the kind of statistical anomaly that makes you believe, just a little bit, in something beyond pure chance. Imagine the journey of a coin like this. Pressed into existence in Denver in 1969, it somehow escaped the mint, somehow found its way into the world, and then somehow, through a series of decisions and accidents and strokes of fortune that we can only guess at, it ended up in the hands of someone who recognized it, or perhaps simply kept it without fully understanding why, setting it aside in a way that protected it from the damage that destroyed so many of its contemporaries. Perhaps it was a mint worker who pocketed it at the end of a shift, sensing without being able to articulate exactly why that this particular coin was different. Perhaps it was a collector who spotted it in change at a time when double die varieties were just beginning to attract serious attention, who squirreled it away in a protective holder and stored it carefully and never told anyone what he had. Perhaps it passed through several hands over the decades, each owner holding it for a while and then passing it on, until it finally reached someone who knew exactly what it was and what it was worth and submitted it to a professional grading service where it received the certification and the grade that transformed it from a remarkable curiosity into an earth-shattering treasure. The auction records associated with the finest known 1969 D Jefferson Nickels are the stuff of legend in the coin collecting world. Each time one of these coins surfaces and goes to market, the numismatic community holds its breath collectively, watching the bidding escalate with a mixture of excitement and disbelief that never quite diminishes no matter how many times they have witnessed it before. The final hammer prices have climbed consistently and dramatically over the years, each new record surpassing the last by margins that would have seemed impossible to predict at any earlier point, driven by an ever-growing pool of wealthy collectors competing for an ever-shrinking supply of top-quality examples in a market where true rarity and true perfection almost never overlap, and yet, in this coin, in this extraordinary, impossible, magnificent coin, they do. $74 million is not just a number. It is a statement. It is the market's way of saying that this coin, This tiny disc of metal pressed into existence during one of the most extraordinary years in human history represents something that money alone cannot fully capture, something that transcends its own material existence and becomes instead a piece of time itself, a physical artifact of a moment when the world was changing so fast and so fundamentally that even the coins being made in the midst of it carry that energy, that charge, that sense of standing on the precipice of something vast and unknown and utterly transformative. The 1969 D Jefferson Nickel is not just the most valuable coin on today's list. It is a monument. It is proof that greatness can hide anywhere, that fortune can take the smallest possible form, that the difference between a coin worth 5 cents and a coin worth $74 million can be invisible to the naked eye and yet represents the entire distance between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one. And as we close today's chapter here on Rare Coin Finder, as we bring this incredible journey through 3 of the most valuable Jefferson Nickels ever identified to its final, breathless conclusion, I want to leave you with this thought. Somewhere out there, right now, in a jar, in a drawer, in a forgotten collection, in a box that hasn't been opened in 30 years, there may be a coin just like the ones we talked about today. There may be a 1983 P, or a 1975, or a 1969 D Jefferson Nickel sitting in the dark, waiting. Waiting for someone who was paying attention. Waiting for someone who watched this video all the way to the very end. That person could be you. So go look. Go check. Because history has a funny way of rewarding the curious, the patient, and the ones who refuse to walk past a nickel without wondering, just for a moment, what it might truly be worth.